What's up, everyone? I'm Steven Harrell, Tiny House Listings, and today I'm out here at my little cabin in the woods that I like to come to a lot and sit and meditate and think about things. And today I was actually sitting here thinking about the 30-year mortgage loan. I think about this type of stuff a lot, given the industry that I'm in with tiny houses and such. And so I did a little bit of research on the 30-year loan and found out that by the 1970s, the 30-year mortgage loan was basically the standard for the FHA, which they adopted in the 50s. And so I got to thinking, I started thinking about all of the things that are associated with a 30-year loan. And I've read a lot of articles on this subject, and I've heard a lot of advocates of the 30-year loan say, well, a 30-year loan allows me to have a nicer home that I otherwise would have been able to, or it allows me to afford a home. And the truth of the matter is, in my personal opinion, if it takes you 30 years to pay for something, you can't afford it. Let's just be honest with you. All it is, a house is some labor and materials and a little bit of dirt that it sits on, depends on the situation. But to spend 30 years, which is literally half of your adulthood, paying for a home is kind of crazy, right? Like if you think, and this might sound like a bit of a stretch to you, but if you look at every animal in the animal kingdom, they spend very little on their housing, right? Like a nest or a burrow or whatever it happens to be, right? And and what I'm not I'm not suggesting that we live like animals, but what I am suggesting is that perhaps we place too much emphasis on our housing, right? Like what it is or what it should be. If the average person in America were to just decide to spend half of what they currently spend on their home and go down to a 15-year mortgage or save up a little bit more and avoid all of these associated costs, right? Like PMI Mortgage Insurance. If any of you guys know what that is, that's if you pay less than 20% down on the total asking price of a house or the total buying price of a house, you have to pay PMI Mortgage Insurance, and that's in case if you were to walk away or whatnot, it covers the bank, which I understand why it's there. But if you can't pay 20% down and you're paying 30 years on a house, let's just stop to think about it there, right? But going back to what I was saying before, if the average person were to do that, can you imagine the implications of that for the average person or individual or couple or household if they were to spend just half of what they currently spend on a house? And if there was more housing available at that price range. I think the average, middle class, lower class, upper middle class person in terms of finances just spends way too much money on their income. And there's a lot of evidence to prove it, right? Like so many people, what was the figure I looked at the other day? If you were to take the bottom 10 million Americans in terms of their wealth, if you take the bottom 10 million Americans, add up their total value, right, what they're worth. If you have no debt and $500 in your pocket, you're worth more than those 10 million Americans combined. People are just spending too much money on their housing. They're spending too much money on everything. And it's time that on a massive scale, we step back and look at this situation with a very clear, fresh eyes, because I don't see organizations like the FHA and other people who have adopted these things well before many of us were even born or in a position to buy a tiny house. They adopted these policies, and I just don't think it's necessary anymore that we actually participate in them. It's not working. It's not working for us, and so we're having to create new solutions. It's one of the many reasons that the tiny house movement is a thing, because people, I know myself included, and so many other people that we work with, and you guys, thank you for being here, and subscribers. It's the reason that you're interested in the concept of a tiny house, even if you live in one just temporarily to get yourself out of a bad financial situation. It's why so many people are willing to sacrifice what they think a home should be or what they've been told a home should be. They're willing to sacrifice it to have a better financial situation for themselves and or their family. In my opinion, the 30-year mortgage is a scam. It's a scam. A lot of people look at the price of a tiny house and they say, look at the price per square foot. That's a whole nother video. But if you just take a regular house, the average price that one was sold for last year and the current interest rate, and you pay 30 years on it, you can just about double the price per square foot of what you see in the original asking price. And that's not including all of the other associated expenses with living in a traditional house. So there's a lot to consider, and the easiest thing, the first step, is to reconsider what you think a house should be. The typical drywall, 2,000 square feet, suburbia, or whatever it is, something that takes you 30 years to pay for, perhaps is not a good way to go. I just feel like if you dramatically cut the cost of your housing, it frees up so much money, more money and time, and so much more freedom for yourself to do things you want, or to do the things you need, perhaps pay off debt, student loans, things like that. So I'm curious what you think. Do you think the 30-year mortgage is a scam? And if so, why? Let us know in the comments below. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.